Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is Tuesday, and today we're going to have a writing prompt. We're taking the scene with the down soldier and we're adding to that, and this will be part 3. However, first we will talk about a few terms. The terms I want to look at are swindle and suckered. Let's look at swindle. To swindle is to use dishonesty or deception to deprive someone of money, valuables, or possessions, or it is a fraudulent scheme or action. Our synonyms are cheat, con, gold brick, hornswoggle, scam, shortchange, victimize, rip off, or defraud. There are a few slang terms as well. Those slang synonyms are do and skin. Swindle implies large-scale cheating by misrepresentation or abuse of confidence. In our stories, if our antagonist swindles innocent people, then the protagonist can try to help the innocent gain back what they lost. So this story may not have war in it, battles and fighting. Instead, it might be cops and robbers, or it might be a business that has transactions or other things. Swindle is not the same as embezzlement. Okay, so embezzlement is when an individual is entrusted with a certain asset and intentionally withholds that asset and takes it for himself or herself. Embezzlement is more along the lines of being entrusted with the company checkbook and writing yourself a huge check and then skipping the country. Where swindle is getting people to invest in your business that isn't real and then making off with the money. So there's that slight difference. That one is based on if you lied to gain trust. That's the swindle. That's our term. Or if you had trust to begin with and then you betrayed that trust. Still, either word would be great for a story. Now, let's look at our other term, sucker, or suckered in the past tense. This is an informal word used in North America, so if you're in a different country, then this might not mean the same thing. I'm not talking about lollipops either. This is something, let's look at what it means. Sucker means to deceive, fool, or trick someone in order to make that person do something. This doesn't have to be to the level of swindle, because you can sucker someone into accepting a responsibility, or you can sucker them into going into the woods to catch a snipe or some other bird that doesn't exist. But they have this big old potato sack and they walk around the woods with the open sack and make whatever sound that attracts this make-believe bird. You know, woohoo, 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 whatever sound. And then they walk around trying to catch this bird, and you've described the bird and stuff. And then while they're walking around with the sack, then you flee the woods and you laugh your head off. You know, that's suckering that person into that. So it's not depriving them of something like swindle, but it is kind of taking advantage of their naivete there. So there are many ways to sucker unsuspecting people into things, and hopefully it is fairly harmless. Still, you can use this in your stories. I can imagine a character that you don't really want helping because he or she unintentionally messes things up. So you post them as a lookout in a place that is out of the way. And then you and your character or your other characters go and do the mission. As writers, we can use the concept of suckering someone into something for something that is lighthearted or comedy. So, leave a comment below on if someone has ever swindled you or suckered you into something. Now for our writing prompt. In part 1, we wrote about a downed soldier after he woke up after battle, and we included his senses and memory, if he had any recollection of the battle. In part 2, we had choices on what our soldier did. Did our soldier look to help others? Did he or she make it off the field? Etc. Today, we're just going to continue with this. We are building our stories. We started together, but we don't have to stay together. We don't have a shared plot for this. We are just asking what is next. And we're writing a scene or a page or two to add to this. So, you can make it short, you can make it long, whatever you want to do. I was trying to check my page count, and I have 7 pages. I'm on page 2, so I added a couple pages. Of course, all the work shared on the channel is copyright protected, so send your work to me and let me read it. That way others can hear what you created. This is our fun. This is our community. Just because, I imagined all the vultures coming down and then you seeing the lights off of the armor and stuff, doesn't mean that's what you imagined. You could have imagined, maybe your downed soldier remembers that there's a tripwire, and maybe he looks across and there's no armor. Maybe he just sees the fatigues or whatever they call the army wear. And you see all these people, but you're scared to move because there's a tripwire and stuff. So what I imagine is not what you imagine. And when you send your writing to me and I read it on the channel, then people are going to say, "Oh wow, now I can see that what I wrote is valid." Because what you imagine and what you write is as valid, if not more so, than mine. We each have our own imagination. We each see things in a different way. Maybe you were a soldier and you're creating a story from what really happened to you. How much more valid would that be than what I've written? That would be your experience coming in. And I haven't had that experience. So that would be really good if I could get your writing on here and we could share this on the channel with others and have our fun and build our community. And like I said, it's copyright protected. But you send it in and I will state that before I read it on the channel about the copyright protection. And then we just go from there. So now, pause the video and write a scene or two. Just continuing. I didn't give you a plot, so you can go anywhere with this. Okay? Write your scenes, then come back. And I will then read what I wrote. Welcome back, writers. Now I will read what I wrote. Kamek woke up. He was tremendously sore, so he slowly sat up, and then he moved his body in different ways to gain more range of motion. He knew once he was home, his wife would help him clean his wounds. And if he needed a stitch or two, she would add them. Kamek tried to stand up, but it took a lot of effort at first. As he stood up, the drummer boy and Mouse woke up. Kamek motioned to the drummer boy. "Do you have a name?" "My name is what you call me," replied the drummer. Kamek shook his head to himself. He would have to think about it. In his village, they let the drummers keep their names. They forewent breakfast, mostly because they didn't have anything, and they headed toward their village. As they got closer, they could see the enemy destroyed the logwood fence in many places. They could see the closer homes were half burnt. Although they were still sore, they quickened their pace until Kamek and Mouse broke into a run. The drummer raised his hand to the unicorn, and he continued walking. He was becoming fearful. The men accepted him before, but now they might not. Kamek was calling out for his wife and his son. Most called for his wife and his daughter. They both went straight to their homes. Kamek stopped in the doorway as he saw his wife's mangled body on the ground. "No!" he shouted. "No!" he said again. Then he started crying, and his whole body shook. Mouse stopped in his doorway, and then he just threw up at the awful sight. The unicorn was walking to the center of the village, and the drummer was slowing up. He wondered if he should turn around and leave. The unicorn turned his head towards him, and he received these thoughts. "You will be fine. Besides, where would you go anyway?" The drummer shrugged his shoulders. He received, "Get a pail of water and a rag. The men still need someone to clean them up. You may have to stitch them as well." The drummer looked at the unicorn, startled. But then he went off to get the water from the well in the center of the village. After several minutes of crying and shaking, Kamek went to his wife's body, and he lifted her up and sat on his couch. He hugged her body to himself. Moss's wife's body was in several pieces, and the enemy had strewn those pieces across the house. He wiped his hand over his face several times. He just didn't know what to do. After a few minutes, Kamek looked around, and he thankfully didn't see his son's body. He called out for his son, but he got no answer. He lifted his wife as he stood, and he walked with her body to the village graveyard. He would at least bury her. The drummer looked up at the unicorn because he didn't know if he should disturb the men. The unicorn thought to him, "Not yet. Just be ready." The drummer put the pail and the rag down, and he followed after Kamek. When he saw the graves, he went back to the village to look for a shovel. He brought it back to Kamek. Kamek took the shovel, and he started digging the grave. There was no box to put his wife's body in, but he didn't worry on that. After some time, Kamek glanced over and saw Moss digging a hole as well. But at this point, he didn't know that Moss' wife's body was in pieces. He could tell that Moss didn't look very good, but he couldn't help Moss. Once they had dug the holes, Kamek carefully placed his wife in it and cried and said his goodbyes, while Most went to retrieve his wife. Kamek then started filling the hole with dirt. Kamek stopped short when he looked up and saw Moss place his wife's torso in the hole. At that point, his whole body convulsed, and his heart thudded in his chest. He couldn't bring himself to help Moss yet. He had to finish with his wife. By the time that Kamek had finished covering his wife and replacing all the dirt, Most had finished gathering all the pieces. The last part he put in was his wife's fingers. Most leaned down and kissed the fingers before he put them in the hole. Then he started shaking and crying too much to fill the hole. At this point, Kamek went to his friend, and they embraced each other. After a little bit, Moss just sat on the ground because he couldn't stand any longer. So Kamek started filling the hole with Moss's wife, and the drummer brought the pail and the rags, and he started wiping Moss down and looking for any place where Moss was bleeding. After Kamek finished filling the hole, they moved back to the center of the village. There was a little better light there, since the graves were in the woods to the north of the village. Started the drummer. I've never stitched anyone, but the unicorn thinks you need a couple of stitches on your shoulder. Kamek got up and looked. Yes, he needs a couple right here. Let me have the needle and I'll show you. The drummer handed over the needle and thread, and Kamek put in a couple of stitches. Then Kamek told Moss if he needed more somewhere else to let him know. The drummer then started cleaning Kamek's injuries. Kamek had a lot of bruises, and his enemies had sliced his skin when he had sliced the buckles. The drummer was on his knees, and he held the needle as he looked at the wound. He glanced over at Moss. The man didn't seem like he could do it. The drummer turned back and determined that he would do his best. Kamek jumped at least a few times, and he hollered in pain a few times. But the unicorn encouraged the boy to continue. Once the drummer boy finished, Kamek wanted to see his stomach. Kamek cleaned off the caked blood, and then he put a couple of stitches in the boy. The sun was heading down, and they didn't know where to sleep. The barn seemed to be the least burned, so they moved there, and they would decide what to do in the morning. Okay, writers, that's all I have today. I know you have questions, so leave them in the comments below. When I get your writings, I will ask questions. In whatever video that I read your writings, I will just ask the questions. And it will be fun. Also, you may already have answers in mind for some of the questions I ask. And that will be awesome. Now, join me Friday for Eleni's Pride Breaking Point, Chapter 17. Join me Tuesday for us to add to your cave. This will be part 10. And maybe some more jargon. I kind of feel like that's how we're going to keep running things, because we have so many writing prompts now that do a little jargon and do a writing prompt, kind of squish things into one session. This is not too long of a time either, so I think that works. Leave that in the comments, what you think about having a little jargon and having a writing prompt all together. In between days, don't forget to visit my website, WritewithMykela.com, and read some character bios. If you hit the like and subscribe and the bell, then we will continue to write together. Also, when you do those things, that will help push the channel out there so we can build our community, have a lot more writers with us. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.